And welcome back, and a good day to all. Well, the interior you're looking at may look familiar. We're back inside the cab of our 2016 2500, and in the last video that we did, we removed the center jump seat and installed this center console. Well, in this video, and this may look familiar if you're watching the Red Ram or Candy Apple videos in our 2012 1500, that's right over there. We went and purchased another one of these aftermarket carbon fiber type leather steering wheels that we put inside of our 2012. Same one with the kind of the flat bottom here and the inserts top and bottom, mainly because we're going to put one in our 2500. After driving for a little while now on the one that we put inside of our 1500, I actually like the fit and feel of this steering wheel quite a bit. I didn't think it would make that much difference, that much of a driving experience difference between this wheel and, let's say, for example, a factory wheel here. Now this does get the job done, but again, as you can kind of see, and I'll point them out one more time, you've got areas that you can actually rest your thumbs, and you can see you've got indentations here and also at the bottom that just aren't on the factory one. And to show you another thing on these steering wheels I've noticed, hopefully you can get a good picture of that there, you can see that this replacement steering wheel is a little bit thicker than the factory steering wheel is. And you wouldn't think it makes much of a difference, but it actually does. So with that being said, we're going to follow the same process we did on our 2012 over there, and we're going to see if we can get one of these installed in our 2500. I guess surprisingly enough, it's going to use the same steering wheel and almost the exact same process, even though that's a 2012 1500 and it's a 2016 2500. Just goes to show you how many parts are actually very interchangeable. So the first thing we're going to do, and I went ahead and disconnected the battery so that we can give things time to bleed off before we start playing around with the airbag wiring. You always want to make sure that you've got the battery disconnected before you do anything with the airbag system. You definitely do not want to accidental discharge one of these bad boys in your face. Is that I think what we can do is that once we remove the upper and lower clamshell trim here on the back of the steering wheel, we should be able to get to the bottom two, or I should say the one bottom connector here in the center for the airbag, and then we've got two ones here at the top, and you can kind of see based on the replacement steering wheel where those three airbag hooks are at. And I'll put a link in the description once again to this tool. Just bought it on Amazon, and what this allows you to do is once we got the trim out of here and we got enough space, we can get these tool here on the sides, and it allows you to get underneath the loop, the hook where the airbag comes in, and it just kind of pulls that hook up out of the way and allows this airbag to pop free. And this is much faster than trying to get at it with a screwdriver, let me tell you. This, I guess in my opinion, I want to say this was like $6 or $10, something like that, but it's well worth the money, especially if you're going to be doing a number of these. Like I say, you can do it with a flat blade screwdriver. Don't get me wrong, I've done that, but again, that will make a lot shorter work of it. So what I'm going to do first is, as you saw me done in the previous video, I'm going to just drop this lower kick panel. There's a couple of Phillips screws, both here and one on the other side, and then there's just some clips that will pull out of the way and get this lower kick panel out of here. Once this is out of here, I'll bring you back, and then we'll see about getting this lower clamshell off. Now again, the buttons are a little bit different, but the disassembly is going to be the same on this steering wheel. We also have some added functionality. We've got buttons back here to control the volume and such of the radio. Again, even though these extra buttons are here, it's not really any different as far as how we're going to do the disassembly, but you'll see that here in a short. But let me get work to taking this panel off, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our lower panel off, went ahead and took our screws out, which, just like our 2012 over there, there's a T15 Torx. Let me get you some light. up in this location on this side, as well as the other steering wheel. There's also a T15 machine thread screw, at least on this model, right here in the center that needs to be taken out in order to get the bottom clamshell to separate. And again, most of the work you can do by just taking the top clamshell off if you're not replacing the steering wheel. But again, we're going to try to pull both of these off of here in order to gain access to the airbag releases that we need. But you can see we're loose at this point. There you go, top clamshell is undone. And we should be able to fight with this a little bit. We just need to get this steering wheel tilt handle here just kind of aligned with the little square mark that's inside this lower piece of plastic, and then we should be able to manipulate the lower clamshell off of here. May or may not be able to do this one-handed. Yeah, probably not. Yeah, let's see. Now I'm gonna need it's almost off. Let's see if we can get this. So, well, yeah, it's not really much holding it on that I can see, other than we're just gonna have to fight with it a little bit to shimmy it around this steering wheel angle release lever. So let me fight with this and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our lower clamshell removed, and yes, that's exactly what it is. You just have to push this past the kind of the front part of that lever, but it's just the 3 screws, the 2 that you got to take off in order to get the top clamshell off, and this one right here in the center. Again, they're all T15 Torx at this point. And the question is, can we get to our... No, we're not going to be able to, unfortunately. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, hook the battery back up. I was hoping it was down low enough where we could get to the release, but you can see our clock springs blocking us. So we're going to have to rotate, start it up so long enough so we could rotate the steering wheel and get the lower half of the airbag to release. And then we'll rotate it back around. So, I'll tell you what, let me get to work on this. We may not have to start it. We may have enough play. Nah, yeah, we're not going to have enough play in the steering wheel. We're flat out just going to have to rotate it. Yeah, unfortunately. So let me take care of that. Let me at least get the bottom one popped off, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our steering wheel here rotated. Like I said, unfortunately, I can't actually show you this tool hooking this because it's just a pain to get an inspection mirror and everything back here. But you can see we're gonna just kind of pop the bottom of this loose, leave this loose a little bit, and then start the truck up, roll it back around, and then we'll disconnect the battery to get our other 2 clips off. But since we still have the battery connected, we're just gonna gingerly kind of reach in here and grab our spring. That is, if I can do this one-handed. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get in there. Anyway, but you get the idea of what we're doing here. Like I said, I need both my hands to kind of get a feel for where this tool is at in relation to that release spring. So let me get in here and get this bottom one pop free, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in pretty close to an inspection mirror and a little bit of light here, just trying to show this to you. But this is one of the upper loops, and you can kind of just barely see it in the inspection mirror. You can see that little metal loop that we're grabbing with that tool and kind of pushing outward on, in other words up, to get it to clear the hook that it's on. I really wish, there you go, you can get a little bit better view of it right there. You can kind of see, you'll see it pop up right about where my fingernail's at. When I move my finger out the way, that's what we're going for. So you can see that we've got our wheel turned back around. We still have our bottom part of our airbag popped loose. We do have the battery disconnected, and it's been a little bit just to allow things to drain again. But since you have to start the vehicle and rotate the wheel around, sometimes when you get this bottom one pop loose as you're rotating the wheel, sorry, still got you zoomed in. As you're rotating the wheel, sometimes this bottom airbag clip will reset. So I just usually like to take a Sharpie or a trim tool, just something non-sharp, non-metallic, and just kind of stick it in there in the bottom of the steering wheel between it and the airbag. That way when you're rotating this back around to get to your upper clips, the bottom one doesn't fall back in place and reseat. So let me get these two upper clips removed and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got access to our airbag at this point. Now there's enough slack that I find that you can just generally hinge these up from the bottom, so just kind of swing them up a little bit, and that'll get you access to the clips you see there. They are color coded. You've got a yellow clip and a black colored clip as far as how they plug into the bottom of the airbag, and all you have to do is generally just squeeze the sides of those clips and they should come out. Now I need to, I might be able to hold the camera and just kind of show you this. So if we grab the sides of these clips, squeeze them, you can see we can just come in here, disconnect our airbag, and we've got one more kind of Christmas tree clip, as you can see, for our wiring harnesses at the top of the airbag. So I'm just going to get a trim removal tool on that, get that out of there, and then we'll be able to put our airbag in kind of a safe spot. So let me get that out of there and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our Christmas tree clip undone for our wiring. We've got our airbag just kind of sitting here in a safe spot behind the seat. And it's really not any different than what we were dealing with in our 2012 1500. We've got our horn buttons, which we'll have to migrate over to the new wheel, all of our trim, and as you can see, the airbag wiring does come through the clock spring, but it's not a part of the connector. This connector, which we've already disconnected, as you can see, is just at the top of the clock spring there, and it just controls all of the buttons and functionality that's on the steering wheel, such as these buttons, volume and track control, and if it was a heated steering wheel, that would also be coming through this harness. So the next thing we're going to do, and I am going to use an impact on this, is I'm just going to break this center steering wheel bolt free. You can do it without an impact, but it generally is going to require somebody to hold the steering wheel, because it's going to want to twist on you while you do this, because that is in there with a, how should I say, just a little bit of torque and sometimes Loctite, just depends. And then we'll get our puller on it, which I'll show you that here again in a second, which that'll grab a hold of these two square holes here. We'll thread the nut back in a little bit, push against the, thread the bolt back in, push against the bolt, and that should back our steering wheel out. We just want to be mindful when we're pulling the steering wheel out that, again, these airbag wires, just want to make sure that we don't snag those and, inadvertently rip or tear them, because that would lead to having to do another repair. So let me get this bolt broke free and I'll bring you back, and we'll get this tool here set up, which I've showed you before, but just to show you, we got one by OEM Tools. Number is 37182. I'll put a link in the description below on Amazon of where we purchased this particular kit. And just to show you, for this particular steering wheel, we want these hook looking attachments here, which will go into our square holes there, but I'll show you all that once we get this set up. So if you're going to be doing a lot of steering wheels, even maybe it's all the same steering wheel of various makes and models, this kit is in my opinion well worth it. Now I have seen individuals kind of rock this steering wheel from side to side and get it to break the seat of the taper that it's on. I've seen individuals just kind of hit the steering wheel from behind and left and right hand sides, or kind of push against it with their knee, and they've gotten it free. But I'd rather just use the puller. They're fairly inexpensive, and least of a possibility of damaging something. But let me get that bolt broken free, and we'll get our puller set up, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our puller in, what they call the H-bar. We're using the forcing screw with the optional kind of gives the forcing screw a nice flat bottom. It's got an optional cup you can put on it. And we've got our hooks into our square holes as we mentioned earlier, but we have the hooks facing out. So this one's facing this way, that one's facing that way. That way it's grabbing the outer lip of those square holes. Now what we should be able to do, and what I've found necessary in the past, is just to kind of hold the center of it a little bit as we turn on our center forcing screw, and that should pull our steering wheel off. Generally on these, or at least we'll find out if it's the same on this one, on that 2012 it only took maybe about a turn or a turn and a half at most to get it to break the taper and come off. They're not I mean, they're seated on there, but they're not seated on there too exceptionally far. You may be able to even see by where the steering column shaft comes up into the spline section of the steering wheel down there that you actually can see a little bit of a gap. So the spline section of the steering shaft isn't flush with the top of the steering wheel. So I'm going to see if I can get you set up here, and I'll try to capture this in real time. And if I do, you'll see it in the clip. And if I can't, then I'll bring you back when we get our steering wheel off of here. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, I'm going to try to do this while holding the camera, so it may bounce a bit, but this is kind of the best angle. I tried to angle you up from the seat, but the sun was washing out the camera and such, and just really didn't look like it was going to capture it. But let's see here. I think I've got it tight enough where we don't necessarily have to hold the center to keep it from walking off of our nut. But we're going to give it a try here. Okay, so far so good. Oh, make sure you're still in the shot, sorry. It's going, but it's on there pretty good. Give it a little bit more. There it goes. It popped free. Yeah, it was on that taper pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty much loose. It's wobbling at this point. Yeah, well, it has been on there since it was manufactured. Tell you what, let's just get our center bolt out of here. We'll get our little hooks out of there in a bit. But again, what we want to be mindful of is just our airbag wiring. But we should be able to just kind of walk it the rest of the way off now that our taper is broken. Let me get in and push that airbag wiring through so we don't pull it. Okay, let me pause you a second. Let me get the airbag wiring pushed through and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see there's our shaft, and it looks like we got a little bit of rust on those splines, so that would kind of explain why we're having a little bit of fight there. But like I said, don't let it startle you when it kind of gives like that. Again, just be mindful of your wiring here. We also want to be mindful of our clock spring, that we don't over rotate that too many times. So we'll just make sure that kind of stays put. And then what we're going to do next is same process as before. We're going to start taking our screws out of our trim on our old steering wheel and prep it to get everything installed in our new one. So let me grab some tools here, and then I'll bring you back and we'll be on the bench and we'll do a little disassembly and reassembly. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got you on the bench. We got our old factory steering wheel here, and we're just going to start like we started before. We're just going to take the fasteners out. You got 2 Phillips screws, it looks like, on this one behind here at the bottom, and you got a couple of Torx fasteners, which again look to be, at least in this case, these are T25s. Yes, these are T25s. So what we want to do is just, again, we're going to need all of this trim, all of this hardware, all of the wiring harnesses. We will cross over onto our new steering wheel. again, not that there's anything terribly wrong with this steering wheel. I'm just finding that aftermarket steering wheel to make the drive a bit more enjoyable. These bottom ones look to be captured in. Let's see if our clamshell will separate. Actually, nope, we got a few more screws yet. So that's the back ones. And then if we come up front here on the bottom, we have more Phillips. On the bottom of our steering wheel, we got 2 more Phillips here and 2 more Torx bits at the top. 1 more of our Phillips just fell out the bottom. We loosened up earlier. And so far, again, I'm not seeing any difference between this 2016 2500 and the 2012 1500. They look to be the exact same steering wheel, same mounting points as far as where everything is going to screw together. Well, we're almost there. We're a little bit loose. There you go. Okay, so it looks like on this particular steering wheel, they're snapped or clipped into each other as far as the top and bottom clamshells. There we go. We're loose now all the way around. We got the 2 clamshells separated from each other. You can see the gap there. Now what we need to do is work on seeing if we can get this top one out of here first. And now what we need to start doing is trying to get our wiring harness de-clipped for our buttons across the top here. That'll give us some slack we need to finish rotating this piece of trim. Actually, should give us the slack we need to help get this piece of trim the rest of the way out of here. It looks like it's on the bottom, and they've got the horn wiring going here on top. So again, you can see it down in there in the little corners, the little wiring clips. We're just going to get the loom separated from this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. So I'm going to change direction here. What I'm going to do here first to make this a bit easier is we need the horn buttons to transfer over to the new steering wheel, and you can see the back of them there. They just kind of snap out, snap in place. You just have to push these 2 tabs together on the sides of these buttons, and they'll push right through and release from here. You just want to be careful that you don't break them. You can see it, yeah, you can see that one clearly there. So we're just going to squeeze those 2 sides together, push them through the steering wheel. That'll drop the buttons and get our buttons out of the way, and then we can work more on getting this harness out of here. So I just want to show you, change it up a little bit of direction, but I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got the 2 top horn buttons unclipped from the steering wheel, and then what we're able to do is take that top piece of trim, as you can see here, and just kind of flip it up. And then on the bottom, let me show you this, there's the bottom 2 horn connectors. So with this undone, even though we haven't taken all of our wiring harness out yet, you can see we've got our top horns disconnected. That gave us a little bit of breathing room to flip our top plate up here, so to speak. You can see we've got top trim up. We got our bottom ones disconnected, which now means even though the 2 clamshells are wired together, we should be able to take out our steering wheel, and what we're left with is what you can see there, which is just getting the bottom 2 horn buttons off. But the majority of our clamshell in this case just kind of stays together with this wiring intact. So it's much easier now at this point to basically separate these 2 clamshells in presence for reassembly. So you can see really the only difference, at least on this steering wheel, is that we've got the extra wiring for the switches that go here on the sides. So I'm going to finish pushing these two clips together on these horn buttons, get them popped out of this steering wheel, and get the new one in here and prep it for reinstall. So one moment. And welcome back. So I'm just in the process of taking the harness out of here. Now you could just flip this clamshell back together in the method in which we took it out if you want to do that, but I find it a little bit easier. So these side buttons have their own individual little connections. I'm just in the process here now of disconnecting these. Of course, this one doesn't want to give it up. Just want to be careful that you don't break a wire in the process of doing this, because these are really small. The lock right here is having trouble depressing. What I'm going to do is just hit it with a really small flat blade. See if we can get that to depress. There we go. So that connector is out. That one is out. You can see we can now unclip the rest of our harness from the back half of our clamshell. There we go. Top and bottom are now separated. Then we can work on getting, we've got the rest of our horn buttons unsnapped as well. Now we can work on getting our new steering wheel in here for our reinstallation. And there's our, let me zoom you out and bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our new steering wheel here. We've got our lower clamshell. And what we're going to see, I'll tell you what, let's do this. Well, actually, no, let's try it. Let's try to put our lower clamshell in place. We just need to be able to get to these little connectors there on the side to reattach our harness for our buttons. Otherwise, our buttons aren't going to work. So if we've got this one right here, we can get to that connector. We got this one over here. So none of that's binding. Everything is, yeah, everything's fitting together just fine. Nothing's hitting anything else. And then what we can do is work on getting our wiring back in place for our upper clamshell. Let's see. Again, that's this piece right here. Now be mindful that one of these pieces, this piece right here, the longer pigtail here on the right hand side, goes underneath the steering wheel on the right hand side, because it will actually come down here and plug into the horn relays, or I should say the four horn switches. What we can do is take this wire, feed it underneath, get it to where it needs to go based on the hold downs. Again, I'm just following the hold downs that we took it out of, and it looks like it goes down this on this side, and we'll get that pushed in place here in a bit. And then the top, and actually just lay our trim down. This is our other button. We want to make sure that we route that underneath as well. So that gets to where that needs to go. Now we can start pushing the rest of our wiring harness in place. And what I'm going to do is just kind of, it's a Jenga puzzle. I'm just going to kind of work with the pieces of trim, get everything where they need to be, and get our electrical reattached. Because I don't want to obviously I just want to leave everything unscrewed at this point. That way it gives you as much flexibility as possible. So let me fish this wiring back into place inside of, as far as where it holds down, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our two-side stereo controls, our back steering wheel buttons plugged back into our harness. We're just in the process of getting the wire loom, as you saw earlier, or in this case, what could be called the wire loom, pushed back in the spots it belongs in. So what we want to do next is get our horn buttons snapped back into place, get its wiring where it belongs, because remember we wanted to leave these loose because this is going to be another piece that kind of, one half of it goes underneath this bar, the steering wheel frame on the left hand side, and the other half goes up here for the top. So let me get these situated and I'll bring you back. They just literally, as you removed them, you just line them back up to where they need to be here on the sides, and they'll just snap right back in place. So let me get these situated and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got most of our trim and everything kind of back into place. All of our wiring rerun. We went ahead and also made our electrical connection for our two bottom horn buttons. And just to show you those here, when you get them lined up and you go to snap them back in place, they are keyed. You see these two metal points next to each one of these holes. It's kind of where these will go in. And let's see here. These should go like that with the wiring towards the bottom. I know it's hard for you to see, I'll show you, but when you get them locked in, let's see if this other one does a little bit louder of a snap, but you'll kind of hear and feel, yeah, two bottom ones are a little bit weak in the tabs, but you can see they go in with the wiring facing bottom, and those two tabs on the steering wheel side will line up, and then everything will kind of lock back in place. Just double checking that all of our horn buttons are free, that they'll push in. All of our wiring is done at this point, as far as hooking our side buttons, making sure those never came disconnected, and we also made sure that we reattached our electrical for our side. So what I'm going to do is just put the screws back in this. If you remember, on the inside there's two Phillips down here at the bottom, there's two Torx at the top, and all of these, regardless of whether that they're Phillips or Torx, they're all look to be the same coarse thread length of screw. So let me get all this hardware in, I'll bring you back. One moment. Top screws are in. Figured I'd bring you along for the bottom ones. Now the bottom ones here that we're going to put in, just remember the two bottom ones on top and the two bottom ones here, you're just threading into plastic, so just be mindful of how much torque you're actually putting into these screws. It doesn't take much for it to pull the trim and everything together, and I would say hand tight, a very light hand tight at that. As you can see, again, not much. Again, Phillips on the bottom, Torx on top. On these top Torque ones, you are threading into the metal brace, the metal part of the steering wheel, just like you are on the bottom. So again, just be mindful of that. It still doesn't require a whole lot of torque to tighten those up. So now that we've got that kind of situated, I'm just double checking all of our wiring. Looks like we got everything where it needs to be. Everything's running underneath that needs to run underneath. Sorry, I'm just kind of looking at everything off camera here. Nothing's in the way, nothing's binding, nothing's in the way of a screw point. Nothing will be in the way of the airbag, seating on the clips. We just want to make sure that we don't, have the wiring harness dripping down where it's going to snag a wire that it's not supposed to. So everything looks good. So I think we're ready at this point to bring it back to the truck and get this seated back on the steering column and get our bolt back in. So let me pack you up here, bring you back out to the truck. One moment. And welcome back. So we're back in the cab of our truck. We've got our steering wheel here. One thing I forgot to mention when we were assembling our plastics, which I did go back and do, is remember here on this side as well as here on the other side. The two clamshells are actually clipped together, so I did kind of have to squeeze on this a little bit on each side to get those clips to reseat, but the clamshells seated back together without an issue. So what I'm doing now, and you can see that we also did this in our last steering wheel of this same make for the other truck, is that I just took a gray Sharpie and marked the master splines on the replacement as well as on the steering column itself, just so that we can make sure we got those in the right spot. And the steering wheel, because it's got the master splines in it, which is why you didn't see me mark it earlier, some steering wheels when you take off, there is a possibility it's not going to have a master spline, so you're going to want to mark that kind of where it's at, so you can transfer that mark over to the new one, and or leave it on the old one, so you know which direction to put the old one back in, so it goes back in so when your wheels are straight, your steering wheel is straight. Now with that marked, generally this will just kind of fall in place. Now since we had a little bit of rust that was kind of holding us up, I took a Q-tip and put a little bit of grease on the inside of the splines on our replacement here, just to kind of help ease that install, as well as keep any future rust from being an issue. More than likely what caused it to rust a little bit was just humidity in the air getting to it. And what I'm going to do is I usually like to start these bolts by hand first, just to make sure the steering wheel is nice and seated. And usually when it gets to the point that it wants to turn the whole steering column, then I'll hit it with a couple of quick ugga-duggas on the impact there, at least until the steering wheel stops driving forward onto the steering column, and then you got it. So I'm going to work on getting this back onto here, and I'll bring it back. Just remember, when you're dealing with your airbag wiring, that it's going to come up through the top center there, and again, just be mindful that you don't snag a connector on that. So again, let me get this seated, let me get it on the splines and get it started, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I want to show you kind of an important thing here when putting the steering wheel back on. You see this bottom pin right here in the center? That comes off your clock spring. So make sure that your clock spring is turned far enough so when you drive this steering wheel on, that center pin from that clock spring will come up through the center there like it's supposed to. You definitely don't want to be off, because this clock spring you can have rotated in such a way where even though the steering wheel lines up with the master spline, this clock spring can be turned left or right far enough where it'll actually catch the sides of the steering wheel, and you're going to push against it and potentially break something. So just be mindful of that, and which is why I like to kind of just get this bolt started, get it started on the splines, and just kind of use a normal ratchet and ratchet it on as far as I can. And in some cases you can actually use a ratchet and get it all the way on, but again, just wanted to point that little tidbit out there about that bottom part of that clock spring coming up through here. And also, when you get this lined up on the bottom, then the piece on top will also line up to where it can come through the center of the steering wheel like it's supposed to. So let me finish getting this on and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So having that grease on there does kind of help also to help drive it on with a normal 1/2-inch ratchet. And like I said, once I got it to the point where I couldn't get it to drive on anymore with the ratchet, it was kind of getting a little bit more than hand tight, I did put the impact on there, hit it a couple of times with the impact, which finished driving the steering wheel the rest of the way onto that tapered seat. So we've got it in, we've got it torqued, and what we're going to do next is just hook up our wiring here for the top of our clock spring. Grab a flashlight here, and then what we can do is just grab our little plug. There we go. That'll give us our steering wheel buttons and radio buttons back, and then we can get our airbag, which I'll go get next. We'll get our wiring back for our airbag, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our airbag up here. I'm just got it kind of sitting up here holding on to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our airbag wiring back in. Again, it's color coded. You've got a yellow and a black connector, which corresponds to a yellow and a black opposing connector on the airbag, so they just match up. And then remember, we got the Christmas tree clip, the little hole right there at the top of the airbag for our wiring. And then I'll bring it back and we'll push our airbag back in place. It should grab a hold of our clips and then we should be ready for some testing. So again, I would show you this, but it's kind of hard to get it. Well, actually, let me see if I can get you propped up on the driver's steering wheel and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, hopefully you don't fall over, but just to show you here, I'm going to kind of block your view a little bit. I do apologize, but I need to get this wiring on. So that's our yellow connector. You heard it snap into place. And there's our black connector. That is in place. And now we just need to get our Christmas tree clip put back in to secure our wiring to our airbag connections. There we go. That is now in place. And now we should be able to just take our airbag, get it seated kind of in position of where it's going to go, and we should just be able to push on it. Let me get you backed up here a little bit. Actually, let me change your view now that we can do this kind of one-handed. Get the airbag kind of where it needs to sit, and we should just be able to push on it. There we go. Oop, the bottom didn't seat. There we go. Bottom seated all the way. Just took a little extra nudge. There we go. Now what we're going to do next is, before we put our clamshells back on, I'm just going to go reattach the battery. We'll do some quick testing here. I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just got the key in the ignition. You can see we've got no airbag light, so that's good, which means so it sees our airbag. Test our horn real quick. There we go. That works. And then we should be able to toggle. There we go. Yep. We can toggle our information. We can go back. You can see we've definitely got our buttons here. And then when I get everything back on and get the battery a bit more secured, we'll start it up. We'll test our cruise control. I've got no doubt if this one's working, this one should be working fine. But let me finish getting the clamshell and everything back on, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you, we got our screws back in. Again, the clamshell's got two screws, two T15s, which thread from one clamshell piece to the other. These are just plastic, so again, just mind how much torque you're putting in it. And you've got the one metal one, again, right here, that goes up here, also T15. And this side boot here, I usually like to kind of leave this unattached, and it's pretty easy to put back in. You just line it back up with the two clamshell pieces, and as you can see here, it will just kind of push back in place and clip. If I wasn't doing this over the steering wheel, I gotta get a better angle on it, but this will push back in place. There we go. There goes that side of it. You just kind of have to work it all the way around, get it to clip back into the plastic, as you can see back here, but it's not terrible. Just got to fidget with it a little bit, but that will snap back into place. So let me finish getting that back in. I'm going to get this lower panel back in, which again is just clips back in place, and it's got the two Phillips screws on either portion of the bob nut. So let me get that taken care of and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our lower trim panel in, we got the rest of our shift boot snapped back into our covers. So what I'm going to do next is just give it a start, make sure we don't see any errors, make sure that our cruise control button will turn on. And let's see here. Bingo. Hopefully you can see that there in the dash. I'll turn it off. You'll see that extra little speedometer disappear. Beautiful. Okay, that tells me our buttons are working. You can see I can change radio stations, so our steering wheel controls are working. You can see I can change volume. Beautiful. Okay, let's just turn that off so I don't have to speak over to that. Okay, so awesome. And you can see the end results there. Obviously, if you're looking at the thumbnail, you can see the end results as well. So again, what I like about these particular steering wheels, even though they're aftermarket, just to touch on it, is that the bottom here is flat. So if you're like me and you've got the bad habit of kind of sliding in and sliding out of your seat, you don't hit the bottom of the steering wheel, and usually you don't have to pick up the steering wheel or adjust it to kind of make a combination that gives you a little bit of extra breathing room. The nice thing is about it being flat is that you can kind of come in here with your hand, because you got the imprint here, grab it here, and it kind of gives you a really, really secure grab holds on this steering wheel. And like I said, to me, at least my opinion is it helps the drivability quite a bit. Like I said, I didn't think I was gonna see that much of an improvement when we put it in the red one, but I did, which is again why we're doing it here. So this is the non-heated version. If you have a heated steering wheel and want to do this same modification, you can. You just have to let the seller know, whoever you're buying it from, and I'll put a link in the description below to where I got the second one from. It was the same seller as we got the one from for the 2012. You just have to let them know that you have a heated steering wheel, and they'll ship you the appropriate one out. So it'll have the heating element in here, and an additional electrical connection you got to make sure that you make in order to retain that. But again, like I said, a lot more handholds, they're a bit more ergonomic, and they're a bit thicker, which helps with grip, so to speak. Well, with that being said, again, the process was nearly identical to our 2012. Really no differences in it, other than that we had the radio control buttons, which was some additional electrical that we had to account for. Other than that, everything was pretty much the same. So with that being said, this is our second upgrade on our 2500, but this is applicable to a wide range of 4th gen Rams, anywhere at least from 2013, actually I would say probably 2009 on up to 2018 uses pretty much the exact same setup. But this is our second upgrade for our 2500, as you see here. First upgrade was the center console, second upgrade was the steering wheel, and I actually do like the fact that it has the red accent stitching on it as well. And the next upgrade I think that we're going to tackle is that you can see we have what they call the 3-inch EVIC display. Which is where you get your mileage and the other information you saw me kind of scrolling through as a test. Well, later versions of Ram, they've upgraded this to, I think, a 7-inch EVIC, if I remember correctly, is the dimensions on it, in which they shrunk these gauges down, made some more room, and made a much, much easier visual center panel on here that not only displays what we have on our 3-inch, but also displays some additional information that we currently have to scroll through on this cluster in order to see. So we're going to be upgrading to a premium cluster, which just came in the mail today, as a matter of fact. So I believe that might be our next video. And I know what you're thinking. Well, why didn't we do that when we had the steering wheel off? It had made getting that cluster out of there, so much easier. Well, to be honest with you, that cluster can come out with the steering wheel installed. We may have to tilt it down a little bit just to kind of get it out of our way, but it can be done. And I wanted to do it this way to show you, if you were tackling this as yourself as a fellow DIYer, and you had the steering wheel in place, kind of what you're gonna run into doing this. Like I said, it's fairly straightforward, but we opted to get one from eBay that was not programmed. So it is still set up for the donor truck it came out of, as far as mileage, idle hours, total engine hours, so on and so forth, and we're going to have to program that. Now, we got a scan tool that I believe states will let us correct the mileage on the cluster, but we also have Alpha OBD, and we're going to use Alpha OBD to actually correct all the values. In other words, we're going to use it to update it to match our mileage, our idle time, and our total engine run time. I believe is the 3 values that we need to update. So that should be a fun video. Again, we'll be switching out to a premium cluster and showing the programming steps on that using Alpha OBD. And plus it'll give us a much, in my opinion, a much nicer looking cluster, with a lot more information that we can display. But with that being said, I have rambled on long enough. Hopefully you have found this helpful. If you have subscribed already, I do thank you. If you have not, please consider doing so. Our goal is to hit that 3,000 mark by the end of the year. And with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.